Theory number one, the theory of a runaway convention. Alarmists have suggested that delegates could go rogue and rewrite the Constitution because Congress can't control them. And sure enough, if you look in the Constitution, there's nothing that says how Congress can control these state delegates. Well, guess what they say about those powers that are not delegated to Congress? Who are they delegated to? The states, exactly. So that conspiracy theory is simply false because the 10th Amendment gives that power to the states. State applications can limit the debate to one topic, as they do. If you look at these state applications, the state legislators are no dummies. They will in there explicitly say, we will only participate in a convention that's limited to this amendment. A balanced budget, term limits, what have you. Second, state delegates are kept on a tight leash by the legislature. The legislature can choose when they are commissioning these delegates to go to the convention. They will read them off the actual application, and then they will give them limits on what they can do. And if they were to somehow go rogue, go nuts, and try and propose some amendment that was not allowed, they would immediately be removed and replaced. Some states, if they so choose, can choose to put legal penalties. I mean, this person has been commissioned as a representative of the state. Would you expect someone who went off to some sort of convention of states out west, they're dealing with land right issues, taking back lands from the federal government? If I commissioned someone to represent my state at one of these meetings, would I expect that they would just somehow go crazy and try and do something in the state's name that wasn't authorized? And if they did, they'd be pulled home, and they could have criminal penalties applied to them. So that's how the state legislatures are able to control the delegates. Conspiracy theory 2, party takeover. The thought that one party could dominate this process. Of course, our fear would be you'd have some leftist agenda trying to be put through. Well, guess what? That would be impossible. There's no way that one political party could hijack the convention and shred the Constitution, because neither party has enough states. The Democratic Party controls 17 legislatures, and the Republican Party controls 28. So if anybody could be given an advantage in this, it would be the Republican Party. If we went with the 28 states, you would have to get 10 more Democratic states to go along with it. So either way, there is absolutely no way that one party could control the process. And ultimately, remember, all of this is a moot point. This is smoke and mirrors. This is absolutely silly because 3/4 or 38 of the states have to ratify. What we have to remember about this convention is that all it can do is propose amendments. If somehow some crazy amendment got through that process, say to take away our Second Amendment rights, how many Republican states do you think would go along with that? There is no way you can gain that. 38 states have to ratify, which means ultimately that's your safeguard. Now, there's another myth. Conspiracy theory number 3. The 1787 convention, where our founding fathers wrote the Constitution, was supposedly a runaway convention. Alarmists have attempted to cast doubt on the Article 5 convention by comparing it to the Constitutional Convention of 1787, which they claim was a runaway convention because our founders exceeded their mandate from the Continental Congress by proposing a new constitution which had not been authorized by that Congress under the Articles of Confederation. Well, once again, false. The 1787 convention did not run away. The Articles of Confederation constituted a treaty between 13 sovereign states, not a national government. There's no way that you could compare the Articles of Confederation to the federal government that we had now. The states simply established a very weak form of government so that it was essentially a place where you could plot war strategy. In 1776, when our founders were about to declare independence, they had one group who was dedicated to writing the Declaration of Independence and another panel or group that was set up to write the Articles of Confederation. Our founding fathers were breaking away from a tyrannical government. The last thing they wanted was a strong central government. So that did last them throughout the war. But after the war, they realized that it was not an effective form of government. So, because it was not ever meant to be a national government like ours, as such, all real power remained with the states. To prove that, all you'd have to do is go back and talk to George Washington. He was given fits by the Continental Congress's inability to get him uniforms, supplies, arms. He went on, and guess why? The Continental Congress would pass resolution after resolution requesting funds and supplies from the states. And guess what? It was ultimately up to those state legislatures to decide whether or not they wanted to comply, because the real power lay with the states. That's why the states didn't need permission from the Continental Congress to meet in convention and propose a new form of government, because ultimately the power rested with those states. Now, even if the Constitutional Convention had run away, that wouldn't have anything to do with the Article 5 Convention, which is only empowered to propose amendments, whereas the 1787 Convention was empowered to propose an entirely new constitution. And if you look at it in Article 5, the literal name of the Article 5 Convention is Convention for Proposing Amendments. That's it. And within the wording, it also says that no state can be deprived of its representation in the Senate unless it does so with its own approval. So there are limits placed upon the Article 5 Convention. Now, if we were to sit here and game this and say, how are we going to fix our government? You've got two ways. You can trust this brilliant mechanism that our founding fathers left for the states. Or, if you say no, guess who you're putting your faith in? How is that? How well are we working out with that? This is why we are here. I was talking about this a year ago and no one gave me any notice at all. You know why you are all here? Because you realize that this is who we've left our fate with. If we don't do something, if the states don't take action using this mechanism our founding fathers gave us, this is who we are trusting with our fate. Now, how about the Article 5 Convention advocates? Who throughout history has supported it? Well, we can start with our founding fathers, all of whom support is obvious because they signed the Declaration of Independence. They signed the Constitution itself. Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, the father of the Constitution, Ben Franklin, George Washington. Thomas Jefferson didn't actually sign the Constitution, but it was his assertion of the Declaration of Independence that if a government becomes destructive, we have the right to alter or abolish it, that provided the inspiration for the Article 5 Convention. And then, of course, we've got Dwight Eisenhower, and of course, Abraham Lincoln, Ronald Reagan, who actually pursued this in the 1980s. And we have a guest here who actually worked with Ronald Reagan on this campaign. Ronald Reagan, under his leadership, we got to 32 states for a balanced budget amendment. 32 states applied back in the 70s and 80s, and it just stalled out. And you know who was the last state not to approve it? Ohio.